What are the chances that Brandon Montour comes back earlier than expected based on what we've seen online? And on today's show, we are going to discuss a whole bunch of over-unders based on the team and for players over-unders as well on today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Wednesday, August 23rd edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez, and you can follow me on X at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers. And thank you once again to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. So a few housekeeping things before we get on for today's show. The Florida Panthers, during their home preseason games on September 25th and September 29th against the Nashville Predators and Carolina Hurricanes, the tickets will be $15. General admission and parking will be included. And because the September 25th games are a doubleheader, re-entry is allowed for that one. Both of those games will go to Florida Panthers Foundation to benefit youth hockey in South Florida. Also, best of luck to all the nations competing in the AmeriGold LatAm Cup, which begins today, August 23rd, all the way until the 27th at the Florida Panthers Ice Den. And we are 50 days away from opening night. For some people, it might be actually 49 days, and you'll see why in just a few seconds. But be also, fans, we want to continue celebrating the 30th anniversary of the Florida Panthers. So in the next week or two, be on the lookout for a link on the show notes and on our social media pages on ranking the top 30 Florida Panthers of all time, going throughout the 30-year history of the franchise. But it is Wednesday, which means it is a Winans Wednesday edition of the show. And the reason why we say 49 days for some people is because Jacob Winans is joining us from across the world, as he is currently in the Philippines covering the FIBA World Cup. It's crazy how with the AmeriGold LatAm Cup with a whole bunch of nations competing, Jacob is across the world covering another sport with multiple nations competing. Jacob, great to have you on, as we are currently 12 hours apart from each other, but still able to make a recording time work. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thanks for having me. This is definitely one of the crazier ones we've done. Yeah, I am 12 hours ahead. So as of this recording, it's just after midnight for me. You can see the black in the window behind me. But no, it's always a pleasure to be on. I've been on 3 flights in the last 25 hours. A couple of layovers, hopped right off a plane, came to the hotel, and fired up the webcam and the microphone so we can talk some Panthers hockey, even in the Philippines.
Yeah, so we've done an in-person show, a car cast, and now one half with you halfway across the world. But let's go right into the topics with the Florida Panthers and all. And this is something that I've just been wondering over the last few weeks. You know, Nick and I were definitely discussing a lot of this last week, especially. But I also want to discuss more about, really, when it comes to the videos that have been out on Montour as well. And then we're going to ask a question later in this segment. But let's start with Montour and his rehab. And I want to ask you, when it comes to motivation and him trying to be ready for the season, let's not forget it's a shortened off season for the Panthers. What do you think are the chances that internally that he is talking to the front office and the coaching staff that he is not necessarily rushing, because we are competitive people. You and I being athletes, we want to be out there and play. What are the chances that you think that he is trying to convince the front office and coaching staff that he will be ready for opening night, especially based on him being in a contract year?
I think the chances are 100% that he's trying to convince everyone who will listen that he's going to be good to go for opening night. I think as an athlete, athletes are always going to try to push the limit and do everything they can to be available. The best ability is availability, and especially in a contract year, Brandon Montour doesn't want to waste any games not on the ice when he could be building off of a career year and in turn building his own value. So I think it's a virtual guarantee that he's trying to convince everyone that he's good to go. Whether or not that results in him being on the ice for game one or not, that's a completely different story, because at the end of the day, the medical staff has final say. And after the medical staff, it's up to the coach. If Paul Maurice wants to risk putting him out there prematurely, and I don't think it's worth the risk. I think the Panthers have enough defensively to at least start the year, not necessarily breaking even. That's not what I would want to say, but they won't. They should have enough defensively to keep their head above water with Montour out. So I don't think there's any reason to push it or risk re-injury. He's too important to the team. It's too important of a season for him personally, and with his next contract up in the air. I think he's absolutely going to try to push it and get on the ice as soon as possible, even if it is an unrealistic timeline. But I don't think the medical staff or the coaching staff are going to let him cut any corners in his recovery. They're going to check every box before he's put back on the ice.
No doubt. And just looking at his recent contracts before Bill Zito gave him a 3-year deal, a 2-year deal with the Anaheim Ducks before he was traded to Buffalo at 3.38 AAV, a 1-year deal for the Buffalo Sabres, 3.85, and then this current contract 3.5. So he's been at a certain number for a few years now, and these guys are millionaires, but even millionaires are thinking about keeping up with inflation as well. So he's trying to get his raise and also trying to provide some financial security. But also, you can't keep everyone. That's the thing. We spoke about this even before the Tkachuk trade. If you were to sign Huberdeau and Weegar to long-term deals a few seasons ago, you are shortening the window with what the Florida Panthers could compete with. And it's the same thing if you were to keep Gus Forsling and Brandon Montour as well, if you were to sign both of them. So I'm under the belief that you only have to keep one. That's my belief. So Jacob, let's put some context before I ask the question about Gus Forsling's 2 years younger. Brandon Montour is almost 30. And I believe they have a similar floor, but Montour's ceiling is a little higher. But did we see Montour's ceiling last season? That's the question. So, going into this question, who would you keep long term, Montour or Forsling?
For me, this is really difficult, but I would have to say Gus Forsling. And it's not at all a knock on Brandon Montour. I want to make that very clear. I think he's one of the best players on the team. But I think it also is very likely that this past season was his peak. I think that was probably his career year. That's not to say he can't get close to it or even surpass it. I could be wrong. And everyone's prime is different. You can stay at your peak for any given number of years. So to say that was his best season doesn't mean that's going to be his only best season. He could do the same thing and stay at that level for a number of years. That's perfectly reasonable to assume that could happen. But given the injury, given his age, and given the fact that it was not an outlier, but it was a 1-year breakout, I think you have to be really cautious about the term and the dollar amount you give to Brandon Montour. I think Gus Forsling, he's younger. He will be more affordable to keep long term. I think his versatility is a little bit better on the defensive end. I think he's a little bit more capable than Montour defensively, a little bit more responsible. And he doesn't really have the injury history that Brandon Montour now has with a major shoulder surgery, which can be hit or miss in recovery. So I would personally keep Gus Forsling long term over Brandon Montour. And another aspect of that is trade value. I think if something were to go wrong with the Panthers this season and they end up in a sell position, I think Brandon Montour would fetch an absolutely massive haul in a trade. He's a right shot defenseman. He's proven offensively, proven in the playoffs. I think if worst case scenario, the Panthers end up having to trade someone, Brandon Montour brings back the most. So I think you end up, I think if it's between the two, you probably keep Forsling. But I'd love to see them both stay.
I definitely would as well, but the cap is definitely a real, even though a lot of people say the cap isn't real, but it's not like the other leagues where you have player options and all that and guaranteed money after a certain amount of the deal like the NFL does. So Montour is going to require a higher cap hit. He's probably going to require also a longer term. While I think the max for Gus Forsling won't be anywhere over 5, at least in my opinion. And I think the max term, I don't think you're going to get anything over 4 years neither, which Montour can get at least up to 8, or if he goes to another team, 7 as well. So I think that's also, you got to consider that when it comes to, but hey,
and
good news.
Someone will pay it. Someone will pay it. There's no doubt. Someone will pay that.
So you also, good consideration is that the projection is 87.5. And if it's that track of 4 million plus every year, it won't look as bad. But again, so you still want your flexibility long term and to still increase that window. And of course, let's also not forget clauses as well. No move clause, no trade clause that could be added that just keeps you in this in a horrible position if you are putting someone their long term on a certain amount of term. But we're gonna park that conversation here. But this we're gonna have a little fun here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. We're gonna talk all over unders based on the team and based on players as well. We're gonna discuss that more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. But first, we're going to tell you all about Birddogs. And Birddogs makes you look good. Birddog stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thighs, leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. Birddog shorts do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but fit way better. They fit better than any regular shorts. They're made with strict restricting cotton. Birddogs fixed this issue by inventing cloud knit fabric that looks like khakis, but stretches, get way slimmer fit, and doesn't sacrifice movement. Birddogs uses anti-stink sweat wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long. Go to birddogs.com/lockedonNHL and enter promo code LOCKEDONNHL for a free white tech hat with your order. That's birddogs.com/lockedonNHL or promo code LOCKEDONNHL for a free white tech hat. You won't want to take your bird dogs off. We promise you. Segment number 2 here on this Wednesday, August 23rd edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast for another edition of Winans Wednesday. But if you're Jacob, it's actually August 24th as he is coming to you from Manila, Philippines here. And let's go over some over-unders, my friend. So I want to start off with a funny one for you. And we're not necessarily going to go rapid style, but we're going to go like maybe your 2 or 3 sentences here, or maybe up to a paragraph, depending on the topic. But I want to start with Paul Maurice meltdowns. He had 2 of them last year. 1.5. I'm gonna let you go first. Over or under?
I'm definitely hammering the over on that. We are the Florida Panthers. The referees will never like us. And as long as there's certain refs that when we get them, it's going to be a long night. So I'm definitely going the over on 1.5 Paul Maurice meltdowns. You could have set that at 4, and I would have still taken the over. We'll see how well Paul Maurice keeps his temper in check this season. But if we're gonna set that, I want to know if the meltdowns count just on the bench or in the press as well, because that's a key point to think about, because he does not hesitate to shoot off some fiery comments about refs in post game. So definitely taking the over on that.
It's funny because I didn't really as far as meltdowns, I meant meltdowns on the team. I guess I should have set that one higher, but as far as meltdowns on his team, but hey, you could definitely set that at 4.5. If I'm going to put 4.5, maybe slightly under, maybe like 3 or 4, because being in this industry for a decade plus, over 2 actually. We know we don't know when he's going to fire off. But as far as his team, 1.5, I'm going to say under as far as on his own team. Based on there's going to need to be more patience as far as the injury situation for the blue line as well. Now that the team is a year into the system, I think the team knows the expectation more when they come into this season as well. I think that's going to be definitely something that on his own team under. But if you're setting 4.5 as far as team and officials, you could set at 4.5, and I'll take maybe the under on that one. All right, goals against 3.32 was the number last year for the Panthers. I'll go first on this one. I think it's going to be under. I think the Panthers could actually be better this season as far as that. Mark Stahl is gone. So that's definitely a big factor as far as that. But I just believe and I know there's going to be complaints about Oliver Ekman-Larsson, which we'll get to Oliver Ekman-Larsson a little later in the show. But he won't be asked to play a big role later in the season, hopefully. So I think that there's a possibility with a lot of players having a lot to prove, like Nico Mikkola and Mike Riley, especially Dmitry Kulikov as well. There's and with Sergei Bobrovsky, just the possible momentum going over. I think that it could be under 3.2.
I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to go under. I think a number of factors go into that. I think last year the Panthers, 1, you're learning a new system. 2, we forget that they started the season in salary cap hell. The situation with the roster they started the season with last year was not good. Mark Stahl, that's the only explanation needed on that one. Mark Stahl. Defensively, I think the Panthers kind of figured it out in the playoffs, and I think they can carry that style into regular season. I think Sergei Bobrovsky found himself again in the playoffs, and I think even with the offseason, I don't think he's going to suddenly lose that form. And then the big thing for me is Spencer Knight's coming back, and I expect Spencer Knight to have a big year. I think Spencer Knight's gonna take a big step forward in his development, and we're gonna have 2 really, really solid goalkeepers this season, in addition to a better defense as far as depth is concerned. And I'm looking forward to hearing this, to seeing what direction we go in with Oliver Ekman-Larsson, because I'm definitely not as low on him as a lot of people are. I think there's still a lot there to work with. So I'm definitely taking the under on goals against.
Mm-hmm. All right, we're gonna do two at a time, so we're not here for like 45 60 minutes because we both have a lot to say. Goals for 3.51, that was last year's goals for, and then total points. I averaged it between the President's Trophy winning season and last year. So goals for 3.51 and points 107.5. Over or under on both of them?
I'm going to go under on goals for slightly. I think it'll be close. The Panthers have consistently been really good offensively, so I don't think it'll be much of a drop off. I'm going to go slightly under that, given that the Panthers are going to have a much more renewed focus on defense, and I don't think you're going to see. I don't necessarily think you're going to see the insane point production from Verhaeghe and Tkachuk that you saw last year. I think, again, they will get close, but I think last year was unrealistic to maintain or expect every season. So I'm going to say slightly under, but very close in that range. And then points, I'm also going to say slightly under. My prediction for the Panthers points this year is right around 101 to 103. I think they top 100, make the playoffs, of course, but I don't think they get up to 107.
Yeah, I'm gonna go under on both of them as well. I do believe that goals will be distributed more. I'm really high on that Evan Rodriguez signing for as well. And your top 9 is for the most part the same as last year is as well. So they didn't lose a lot like they did two seasons ago as well. But there's gonna be more focused on pacing yourself through the season and not having to play. I believe they're not gonna be playing that game of catch up as well. At least that's my belief. And then the last two for the team: third period comeback wins and overtime wins for the Panthers. So let's talk about last year. The Panthers had 3 comeback wins after the second period and 4 comeback wins after the first. Which, God, that's. You roll your eyes when you hear that. And overtime wins. In 2022, they had 13. In 2023, and this does not include the shootout. In 2023, they had 4. So I averaged that one out. So I put third period comeback wins at 5.5 and overtime wins, excluding the shootout, at 8.5. I think we're going to go over. We're going to see over 5.5 as far as third period comeback wins, especially based on building the momentum off the postseason. And as far as overtime wins, not including the shootouts, I'm going to go under. I think we're going to see more than 4, but I don't think it's going to be crazy to the point where the Panthers are basically unstoppable in the extra period, because that was fun seeing overtime periods on 3-on-3 hockey. That 2022 Florida Panthers team had a lot of people loving the 3-on-3, including myself. But even though there's a lot of criticism with exiting out of the zone and then re-entering as well, even with the open ice, but I'm going to go slightly under on that one.
Yep, I'll start with overtime wins. I think it's going to be slightly under. I would expect somewhere around 6 or 7. I'm going to go slightly under on that. The Panthers still have really, really elite talent, especially in the forward group. So they're going to win overtime games. They're not going to be a bad overtime team, but it's also such a toss up in the NHL today. Every team has skill, and in 3-on-3 hockey, skill shines through, and all it takes is one chance. So I'm going to go under on that, and I hope we're not reliant on overtime wins the way we were in that President's Trophy winning season, because overtime was pretty much automatic that season, and a lot of that was Jonathan Huberdeau. He was excellent in overtime. And then as far as so we had overtime wins, and just remind me, what was the second one?
Third period comeback wins at 5.5.
Third period comeback wins at 5.5. I'm going to go over on that. And I don't want to see the Panthers trailing a lot in third periods, but I do think it'll be over 5.5 because I don't think they're going to be as I don't want to say bad, but they definitely struggled when trying to play catch up in games last year. They just didn't seem to have the firepower to claw their way back. I'm going to say over on that because I think this year they have more offense to get back into games. And also, I don't see them getting blown out or trailing by a lot at the end of second periods. I think there's going to be games where they go into the third down a goal or maybe down 2, and that's not really an insurmountable deficit if you look at the roster that the Panthers carry into this season. So I think I'm going to go over on that. I think they have more firepower, and they also will be keeping games close even when they are trailing. Yeah,
and like we said, that how they were able to do so in the postseason is definitely building some confidence that it is possible for this team to, even when they fall behind, that they never feel that they're out of a game. But in the third and final segment, we're going to go over personal over-unders for certain players, and we're going to discuss that more on today's Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Third and final segment on this Wednesday, August 23rd edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. On today's show, we are discussing over-unders. And in this segment, we're going to talk about some personal over-unders. So let's start with the goaltenders here. So this is the average between the President's Trophy winning season and last season as far as goalie wins for Sergei Bobrovsky. The average between those two seasons is 31.5 for Sergei Bobrovsky. And Spencer Knight starts. His career high in starts is actually 27. And before he went to the Players Assistance Program, he had 19 starts last season. So Sergei Bobrovsky over under as far as wins, 31.5, and Spencer Knight starts 25.5. What says you, Jacob?
I think I'm going to go just under on Sergei Bobrovsky wins, partly in due to my answer on the second one. And I'm going to say Bobrovsky finishes right around 30 wins, which is a really good number. And I think Spencer Knight, I'm going to take the over on starts for Knight. I think he's going to carry more of the workload this year. I think in the beginning of the season, it'll be heavily skewed toward Bob as they ease Knight back in. But I think Spencer Knight's going to take over a pretty good chunk of the starts, and I think I could see Spencer starting 30 to 32, maybe 33 games, and winning a solid 20 of those, or somewhere close to it, 18 to 20, which would give the Panthers something around 48-ish wins, which I think is reasonable. 48 to 50 wins would be a really, really solid season. So that I'm going to go with under on Bob wins just barely and over on Spencer Knight starts.
I'm going to go under on Bob wins as well, maybe like somewhere around 28 to 30 around there. And let's also not forget that when training camp cuts happen and you pick up someone off waivers, they have to be on your opening night roster. And based on the Spencer Knight still being waivers exempt, he can start in Charlotte and have Anthony Stolarz there. And like you said, the workload for Bob is likely going to be him to start the season, but I'm expecting Spencer Knight to be part of the team even before December. As far as that, even if he starts a little bit in Charlotte, Anthony Stolarz might get a start or two just in the beginning of the season. But as far as from January on, I'm not picturing Stolarz being the second goalie on the team during that part of the season. But we could see him being the second one in the beginning of the season. But I do think that by the time that Spencer Knight does come back, I do believe that he is going to be over that 25.5. Next two are Alexander Barkov goals and Tkachuk points. Alexander Barkov, 39.5 goals. And you could guess why I put it at that number, because he's never had a 40-goal season. Of course, health has had a lot to do with it. And Tkachuk's points are the average between the last two seasons of him and his last season, Calgary at 104 and last season at 109. So I put 106.5 as far as that. Barkov has historically started off slow in the season. I do believe Barkov's focus more in the offseason is strength training more than it is any stick handling, shooting, and all that stuff, which honestly, I don't see anything wrong with that. You're trying to build your physique and you're trying to be harder on the boards, and especially for your puck battles. That does pay dividends as well later on, but it takes a little bit for him. But there needs to come a time where the fast start has to happen for Barkov, and I do think that it's going to happen for him. So I'm going to go over on that. And for Tkachuk's points, I'm going to go slightly under. I still think he's going to be in the 100-point range, but I think it's going to be maybe around like 105 around there for Tkachuk. But still, that's still a great season for Chucky as far as that.
Yep, I'm going to go over for Barkov on 39.5. I think this is the year where he finally tops 40 goals. I think during the playoffs, he finally found a little bit more confidence and willingness to be the guy offensively and take the big shot or make the big play and get shots on goal. I think if he can carry that into the regular season, he starts the season off with less passiveness, less deferring to other teammates and more assertiveness and shooting, I think he tops 40 goals, and I think he tops 100 points this year as well. Matthew Tkachuk, I think, will be slightly under 107. I think he'll just barely top 100 points this year, somewhere around 35 goals, 65 assists, give or take a few on either one of those stats. I think he's going to be right around there. Not a bad season by any means. If you can go 3 years in a row over 100 points, you're probably considered the best winger in hockey right now. I think he's got a case for it. I can't really think of anyone at the wing that I would definitively put above Matthew Tkachuk right now. So
maybe Pasta.
Maybe. But playoff performance matters, and head-to-head, Tkachuk beat him. So you could have that argument. But I think Tkachuk ends up right around 100. I think Barkov will actually lead the team in scoring this year. Wow. I think he takes that on this season and ends up being the team leader in scoring with both goals and points overall.
Yeah, David Rodriguez of the FLA Cats Hockey Podcast actually had a poll who scores more goals, Verhaeghe or Barkov. I actually have not voted in that one, but I saw the post earlier. But I'll probably go ahead and vote on it after we're done recording this show. Evan Rodriguez power play goals. The last 2 seasons, he's had 12 and 10. And then Sam Reinhart goals, 29.5. You can see where I'm going there as far as that. As far as Evan Rodriguez goals, I'm going to go slightly under, but it's not going to, I don't think it's going to be under double digits neither, but I think he's going to be very serviceable on the power play. And Rhino, the fact that he had 30 goals and he was off to a slow start, you have to go to the over. I think that one would be an obvious one to go over. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I'll start with Rhino. I think an obvious over. I think you take the over no matter what on that. He doesn't do it flashy. He's not. None of Sam Reinhart's skills jump out as elite or best in the league or anything like that. But he's just so solid and so consistent. I think you definitely take the over. I think he gets over 30 goals again. I think he gets up around 75 to 80 points again. I think he's still a menace on the power play with his deflections. And I think he has another really strong playoffs. What that means for his future as a Florida Panther, we'll have to wait and see because a new contract will have to be discussed. But I think Sam Reinhart puts up another really strong season with over 30 goals and around between 70 and 80 points. And Evan Rodriguez, I'm going to go slightly under on power play goals. I would estimate somewhere around 8 or 9. Not bad by any means, especially at his cap hit. He has an absolutely wicked one-timer, which is something the Panthers have been missing on that side of the ice. And I think his power play points will be higher than what he's had before, but I think power play goals will be slightly lower. Given his positioning with that one-timer, I think that means great things for Sam Reinhart, for Matthew Tkachuk, guys who make their living right in front of the net, tipping shots and putting in rebounds. I think that Evan Rodriguez one-timer will open up a lot of rebound opportunities for those guys in front. So I think Rodriguez has higher points, fewer goals, but just slightly.
Yeah, and we also got to consider that he's not going to be. He could play some power play 1, but it's not going to be every single game. You're going to see some on power play 2, some on power play 1. So that's going to affect how
right. It'll be very dependent. It'll be very dependent on how he starts the year. Yeah, because the power play unit with injuries will look slightly different to start the season. Panthers went 2D a lot last year, and obviously if Montour and or Ekblad miss time, there should be an opportunity for him on that top unit to start. And if he runs with it, then he could see some extended power play 1 time.
And definitely not expecting 5 forwards, but never say never for this one especially.
Yeah, that was an interesting experiment when it happened.
Yep, no doubt. So let's finish with the last 3. So this is actually something for you and I, and even Nick as well. Us complaining about Oliver Ekman-Larsson because we've definitely had our complaints about the likes of Mark Stahl, Aaron Ekblad last year based on their defensive play. So that one's set at 9.5 complaints on this podcast about Oliver Ekman-Larsson on maybe a boneheaded play. Um, the next one is Lundell. Games that Lundell plays on Barkov's wing, and that's not just one shift or two. It's a good majority of the game. You each be the judge of that, whatever that means. That one's set at 9.5 as well. And then this one, Grigori Denisenko, 25.5 games played. He's on a one-way deal. The most he's played in a season with the Florida Panthers has been 18, and this includes healthy scratches. And if he gets put on waivers, which I don't think that's a chance you want to risk with Denisenko as well, but that one is set at 25.5. So frustrations with OEL 9.5, Lundell's games played on Barkov's wing 9.5, and then games played for Grigori Denisenko 25.5.
I'm going to start with the under on Ekman Larsson. I am a believer in Ekman Larsson this season. I think to start the year, that's when you might see some of our complaints. He'll be getting into the system. He'll be taking on a bigger role than what he's expected to have while he's here. I think there's going to be some growing pains with Ekman Larsson fitting in with the Panthers. It's not going to be an immediate success, but I think as far as a reclamation project, he's as high ceiling as you're going to find in a player that you're looking to bring back to their old form. It's not like he hasn't been an elite defenseman before, and it's not like he's too old to be one again. So I think I'm not saying he's going to be elite. I'm not even saying he's going to be top 4 caliber, but I think he very well could, and I don't think he's going to be nearly as bad as he has looked in his last 2 stops, given that he's going to have reduced responsibility. He won't have the pressure of that massive contract he was playing under.
Fair enough.
I think Ekman Larsson's going to be just fine here, and I'm going to go under on that. Anton Lundell, I'm going to go over on games played on Barkov's wing. I think Lundell is in for a really, really big breakout season. I think with Anthony Duclair traded, there's an opening on somewhere in the top 6 on the wing. I think Lundell and Barkov really found something in the playoffs when they did play together, and I think if Sam Reinhart starts slow, a Barkov, Lundell, Reinhart line could be the key to unlocking Rhino's game early, because Lundell and Rhino play so well together. Putting Barkov in the middle is not going to do anything to mess that up. I think Lundell just might end up being too good this year to play in the bottom 6. You might just have to find a place for him in the top 6. So I'm going to go over on that. And then your last one, what was the number you said on that one?
Denisenko, 25.5 games.
25.5 games. Okay. I'm going to go over on that. I think he tops 40 games this year, which I know is a pretty bold prediction given his limited playing time and limited production. I think it's time for him. I think the Panthers are gonna have to see what they have in him at this point. He's had some really bad injuries. He's had some things that have stunted his development that were out of his control. I think it's time for him this year. He got a taste of the playoffs. He played a Stanley Cup game. I think he's ready, and I'm going to go over 40 games. And I'm going to this one might surprise you, but I'm going to give him 10 goals this year. I think he actually hits double-digit goals. I think he'll get 10 goals this season. I think he's gonna show himself as a serviceable bottom 6 winger, a third line depth winger. I think he has it in him. And I think the production at some point is going to come. So I think he's going to play over 40 games. I think he's going to be that good developmentally, where he's going to find a place in the lineup and he's going to keep it.
Yeah, from no goals in 26 career games to hopefully 10. That's a great thing if you can get that out of your bottom 6. I'm going to go quickly because we're running a little long. Frustrations with OEL, I'm going to disagree on you on that one. I think because it's an 82-game season, we're going to go slightly over. We might get a lot of them in the beginning of it, but there might be certain goals. There's gotta be at least one every few weeks that you're gonna think, what was he doing there as well? So I'm gonna go slightly over. Games played on Barkov's wing, I'm gonna say over. I'm gonna agree with you over on that one, because I think you could also trust Eetu Luostarinen to take care of the 3C job while if Anton Lundell does go on that wing, and let's also consider that Eetu can also go on Barkov's wing as well from time to time. as well. So I'm going to go there. And then 25.5 games, I'm going to go over as well. But I don't think it's going to be as far as 40. I think it's going to be more of the 35 variety for Denisenko. Yes, you got to find something there. But what's really going to be telling for Denisenko is how he also is in practice as well, how he takes the criticism as well, the coaching from the staff. Also, so that's really what's going to be telling as far as him getting into the games as well. As he's I'm sure he's sleeping a lot better at night knowing that it's one way on his deal rather than having to jump back and forth. He's like, okay, this is that time. He's probably thinking this is my time. So hopefully we are seeing more than 40 games. If we do, that's gravy in my opinion for sure. But Jacob, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this Wednesday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you for joining me from across the world on this edition of the show. But tell everybody where they can follow you online, my friend.
Definitely. You can follow me on X, formerly Twitter, at Jacob Winans 8. We'll definitely be talking Panthers hockey there as we get closer to the season. And I'll be right back here next week. Same location.
Awesome, my friend. See you next week, my friend.
See ya.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on Locked On NHL Network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steer Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Jacob Winans, and you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.